Namaste, and a very good morning to each one of you. Mercury is all about your brain, your intellectualism. The more you are caught up in your Mercury, the more you will continue to ask many questions. Because Mercury by default is very curious. Mercury is logic, Mercury is your intellectualism. And so a good student definitely need to have a good Mercury. But there is something beyond a student, and that stage is the stage of a disciple. A disciple has to put aside his brain, has to put aside his logic. That is why Sant Kabir says that if you want to become my disciple, first you have to cut your head. What he means is that he is saying that you have to drop all your logic. Meaning in astrological language, you have to drop your Mercury. And that is why in the Mahadasha cycle also, after Mercury comes the real master, and that is Ketu. Now people tend to suffer in Ketu Mahadasha because Ketu is a cleansing process. All that you have learned, you need to unlearn it now. And that is why it is said that the real question is not of learning, but unlearning much. So understand this difference. The more and more influence of Mercury in your chart, you will become a money maker. But even a money maker at some stage starts feeling suffocated. Because wheresoever there is a lot of money, there is a lot of suffering. And so, eventually, after Mercury, one has to come in the domain of Ketu, where everything is released and finally you attain that which your money cannot buy, and that is wisdom, peace, and self-realization. And through all of this, you attain the ultimate joy. I think that is the purpose of this human life. And so in this podcast, I have talked briefly about the difference between a student and a disciple. And I have shared a beautiful story that if you can relate to, you will gain many new insights. Along with the story, I have shared also the essence of meditation. So this podcast is specifically for people who are evolving. This is not for shallow people. I always ask, what is so great to know that tomorrow you will become a millionaire or tomorrow you will become a very famous person? Except for money and status, what good it is going to do to you? I see that the real growth is when you as a person evolve by turning inwards. That is the real success, the real growth. And that comes only by your own efforts and by the grace of the Master. And so in this podcast, you will definitely enjoy listening to this beautiful story of a young man who sets out to seek a real master. And then what happens? And there are many more insights that I have shared in this podcast. So let's begin.
There was a young man, and one day he set out on his journey to find the truth, to find God. And after a long journey, he came to the Himalayan mountains. There was a small village. He found a great master sitting under a huge banyan tree, and many villagers would come to seek his blessings. The man decided to stay near the banyan tree. Every day he would sit near the master, but the master would never look at him. The master would ignore him. He would meet others, but he would never look at him. But the young man was a man of heart. He had been a meditative person. Love was his goal. Love was the only language that he knew. So he stayed. He stayed for weeks, for months, and the master continued to ignore him. 2 years had gone by, and one afternoon it happened. For the first time, the master looked at him, and the man's eyes were filled with tears. Those were the tears of joy, as if the whole world had stopped, as if he was reborn at that very moment. How deeply compassionate were those eyes. Just for a minute, the master looked at him. Just a minute. Just 1 minute, and his heart moved deeply. So much so that something happened in his inner being. Something that cannot be expressed in words. The man was touched, deeply touched. And then a few more months went by. The master never again looked at him. Weeks and months and years, and after 5 years, something beautiful happened. One day, the master just looked at him and smiled. A very sweet smile, a very deeply insightful smile, as if the signal was coming his way. He was flowering, he was growing, he was coming closer to his self. The man also smiled back. Not a single word was spoken, not a single question was asked, not a single doubt was raised, and the daily course of life continued. And then, after 2 more years, early morning, when the man was in his deep meditation, the master came. For the first time in 7 years, the master himself came, touched his forehead, and said, Bhola, that was his name. Bhola, you can now leave. You are ready, and so I have come, just to tell you, just to give you the message that you have become a full moon. Bhola, you can now leave and spread the message. And Bhola started crying. He could not control himself. How much he had waited for the master's words. How much he had waited for his touch, for his message. And now, when the moment had come, when he was finding that something was happening, that the master himself was telling him to leave and spread the message, he was finding it difficult to move away from the master. But the master said, Bhola, is there any difference between me and you? Wherever you are, I am with you. Now you leave and spread the message of love. The world needs you. Go ahead. And it is said that Bhola traveled all over the world, touched many lives. healed many lives. But whenever anybody would ask him how he met his Guru, he would say just 3 times. First time he looked at me, the second time he smiled at me, and the third time he touched with his grace, and that is all. A student can wait for a few weeks. A disciple, a true devotee, can wait for eternity. This is the difference between a student and a disciple. Bhola was not a student, he was more than a student. A student cannot be patient. A student is always in rush. He wants to accumulate knowledge. A disciple is always patient. A devotee is always patient. All that the Master wants from you is faith and patience. Sai Baba used to say, I want something from you. Can you give it to me? It requires big heart to give. Weak people cannot give. I want faith and patience from you. And when you give me these two, then you have to walk on path of this. Now ask yourself that are you strong enough to give me? Sai Baba, his whole life emphasized on the significance of having faith and patience, Shraddha or Saburi. Ask yourself, are you strong enough to have faith and patience? If you have faith and patience, then there is no need to worry. There is no need to find the Master. The Master will come to you. There is no need to go to the Himalayas. The Himalayas will come to you. And one day you will realize who is your Master, and then the melting will happen. Then the oneness, then there is no looking back. Then everything around you is the same, but you are no more the same. Then there is a song to it, a beautiful painting, and life becomes a garden of bliss. The relationship between a student and a teacher is that of the head, and a relationship between a disciple and a master is that of the heart. It is a love relationship mad in the eyes of the world, utterly mad. To see Krishna, first you have to be like Arjuna. To meet the Master, first you have to get ready. The cup is useful because it is empty. Unless you unlearn all that you have learned so far, you cannot understand a single word that the Master is saying. Many people come to the saints, to the divine saints, but all they do is nod their heads in agreement. When you nod your head in agreement and disagreement, the mind is in the play. Because it is only the mind that can agree and disagree. The mind is logical, the heart isn't. Do not agree and do not disagree, just be. Just let the golden words of the Divine Master penetrate your being. Don't let the mind become a hurdle, else you will go on agreeing and disagreeing, and in this futile exercise of the mind, you will miss. You will simply miss the most beautiful moment of your life, the omnipresence of the Master, the grace of the Master, the word of the Master. When you go to the mountains and you listen to the sound of a waterfall, do you agree with it or disagree with it? You simply listen. Similarly, when you are in the omnipresence of the Master, just listen. Don't get into the mind trap of agreeing and disagreeing. Let the mind take the back seat and let your heart take over. And when the heart is above the mind, the questions stop, the seeking stops, the noise stops, and all that remains is eternal peace, bliss, and joy within. Let there be no question of finding the destination. Let your journey itself become the destination, and then life will be no more the same. Then the flowering starts happening. Then you truly start living. Life is a verb. Life is not a noun. It is really living, not life. It is not love. It is loving. It is not a relationship. It is relating. It is not a song. It is singing. It is not a dance. It is dancing. See the difference. Remember the difference. Let us all make our life a verb and not a noun. Let us rejoice in living and not in seeking. Let us spend our life in loving, in singing, in dancing, in celebrating. Let us all flow like the river without the worries of how to find someone. Let us all be with ourselves, deeply rooted within our hearts, for that is the true essence of meditation. Let us all be like a bird, living moment to moment, without regretting our past and worrying about our future. Let us all be here now, because past is no more and future is not yet. Now is the only moment, and to be meditative is to be in the moment. Live like a bird, be like a bird, live the moment. The Master says, Isness is the business of the Buddhas. It is my business too, and it should be your business too. To be here now is the essence of meditation. Come, come you all, overcome the mind, still the mind. To a man who stills the mind, the whole universe is available. Come, let us all meditate, let us all focus within by turning inwards. Meditate.
ॐ गं गणपतये नमः। ॐ गं गणपतये नमः। ॐ गं गणपतये नमः।